And it's a humid heat in Florida. That's the problem.
Yeah, we're not there yet, but it's gonna be. I mean, it already feels it's like hot, but not humid, so it's gonna get miserable. It's yeah, but you're right,
Sure.
humidity. I mean, everybody says like, humidity heat versus like desert dry heat, and the dry heat's. I mean, either one's hot. I mean, my oven's hot,
That's
and
yeah.
dry heat, and I don't hang out there either. So I mean, hot's
That's
just
right.
hot.
Well, hot is hot. I spent 4 years in Miami. And now I'm in Colorado. In Colorado, we can have temperatures of 105. But it's a dry heat, but
Yeah,
it's still bloody
yeah,
hot. Christ,
yeah. It is. It is. There is a difference, though. There is a difference, I will say.
there is, yeah. The big difference is sweat.
True.
You can either sweat or not, and if you don't sweat, you're in trouble. You're in trouble when you're sweating. You need the water.
Yeah, I don't understand the humidity thing. So,
Well, I'm in Arizona, so we got the dry heat.
yeah, see, you're
But
yeah, that's fine.
California, so it's usually dry too.
Yep, yep.
Well, I didn't understand the whole humidity over 100 because I'm like, okay, if it's 100 humidity, aren't I just underwater? Isn't like 100's got to be the end, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Isn't it raining?
yeah, I know what my cigar
that's
humidor
rain.
is supposed to be at. That's all I know. That's my reference, you know.
Exactly.
Right on point. The perfect entry and the perfect opening for a conversation about cigars and pretty much anything else in life, right? Here's
That's
Fred
right.
Rewey joining us from Florida with, as you said, 20 million degrees outside,
20
looking
million. Yeah.
remarkably relaxed and super chilled. So, what a pleasure. I always love these. First of all, I love the conversations here at the lounge before we go live. So for everybody who's always watching on Facebook, you're so missing out. Everybody, you got to join the Zoom calls here. That's the real deal.
Oh,
And then
Yeah,
yeah,
you
you
missed
you
everything
like
about
the
you missed all the
audio.
jello you missed the stuff about squirrels, jello molds, and 57 Chevys that are abandoned in a quarry. You missed all that. So I mean next time maybe be on time. Come on, people.
we won't go back to that. We'll keep that
Oh no, no, no. That's just for us. That's just for us
a
now.
private joke for us. But I love these conversations before we go live, and I love the conversations, especially whilst we play the intro. It's beautiful. So we should do a. I think we should do a best of at some point and just take the best cutouts from all these little intro sessions. Anyways, welcome everybody. Good to see all of you joining us here at the Light 'em Up Lounge. It's Wednesday. Time for another live show with a very special guest, and this has been one that I was particularly looking forward to. I mean, Fred, you were on the show before a couple of times, right? I think during the
I
pandemic
came
you
as a
joined
guest.
us.
I've dialed in and listened to the show with various people, but I've never been like the guy you put the email out about. So a lot of pressure. Like I wanted to dress up. I feel very underdressed right now. I wanted to wear a blazer and I wanted to be in a lounge or at least have a single malt collection behind me or something. But
This
I'm
is so
just
much
gonna wing it.
better.
I really feel like I should have a fake Zoom background of some sort, but I'm just gonna go with it. I'm just gonna go with it.
I never really understood those weird Zoom backgrounds where it looks like half your head is missing because the technology is doing a horrible job in trying to balance what's behind you and
You
that
don't have a green
virtual image
screen.
everybody's trying to put behind them. So this is so much better. I love this.
Yeah, I worry that those people are like really like I want to know the backstory. Like, how bad is their background? They had to put like the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. I'm like, are they in prison? Is it someplace we're not supposed to know about? I mean, I always feel I in my mind, I'm always trying to come up with somewhere where they really are. So yeah,
You
now
know,
you will too. Sorry, guys. Sorry, I brought you all down
I'm
with me.
somewhat happy that we got past the point where everybody was like doing these business conferences out of the living room, and then you hear the toilet flushing in the back, and the toddlers coming through.
Oh,
And everybody was raving about, oh, he's got the nicest book collection, and then all these people would have these, you know, libraries behind them with tons of books that nobody ever read, but.
Fred, no, I had to take myself off of mute and put my camera on because I was the only person with the background, so I felt a little self-conscious. So now, and I still have another background. Look, I
oh.
went from one background to another background. I just didn't want everybody to see me stuffing my face for the late lunch, so that was my excuse.
I appreciate that. There are probably, the person that shows up in the Zoom call and is eating is always weird to me. Same thing when I'm in an airport and someone calls somebody from the public restrooms. I'm like, don't be that person that has to call somebody from the restroom. Don't be that person.
No doubt.
No eating on
No
Zoom
doubt.
calls, and don't call people from public restrooms. That's all I ask.
Pretty easy ground rules, right?
Well, at least, Fred, you have the menu all decked out on your T-shirt, so that's something
Well,
that counts for lunch.
I'm ready.
Speaking,
Except for maybe
speaking
the
of
Bloody
lunch,
Mary.
what's your cigar lunch for today? What have you picked for today's session? What are you feasting on?
Oh, what am I smoking?
Mhm.
I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm sure. I literally thought you were talking lunch, and I'm thinking, what did I eat? Look, because I ate lunch like a half hour ago, and I'm like, I didn't know this question was going to come. I felt pressure, and because I just had like chicken curry or something. Actually, I have the Allegria, the Illusione Allegria, which is a sister blend to the one-off. So that's what I've started with, and I've got a couple other ones that I can go to at some point. But that's what I'm starting with at this point.
Beautiful.
Good day smoke. I tend to smoke more of a medium plus, I'd say in general. And so I flip back between Nicaraguan and Dominican Republic depending on times of day too, and we can talk about that later. But normally I would be a DR person like during the day a little bit more. But this one I thought with the heat and stuff would be okay.
It's interesting. I've heard mixed feedback on the question as to whether you start with a lighter cigar in the beginning of your day and then you increase, or do it the other way around. Start with the heavy hitter as your first cigar, and then once you work your way towards the late night final little smoke of the day, then you tame it down a little bit because you had enough maybe.
That's a great question. I love talking about that because so I was always the person start out mild during the day and get stronger as the day progressed. And that was probably the way I was for, I don't know, 15 years or so like that, until the time of which I started blending cigars and until the time I started smoking a lot more cigars. Because like if you do an event, like if we do the show or something like that, and oh, how many cigars do you smoke at the show at Pro Cigars? I'm like, I don't want to know. I don't want to count. It's too many. So at that point, I actually started smoking the stronger ones earlier, and then usually towards the end of the night. I mean, you're especially if you have a lot of cigars, your palate's more burnt. It doesn't pick up some of the subtleties. So then I would start to go to the milder ones because I was smoking, just because it was social and not because you were trying to study blends. But I found early on, I can't remember who had mentioned it to me. Back in the day, but I all of a sudden fired up a strong cigar right out of the gate in the morning. And I remember that first morning sitting there going, wow, okay, this is a totally different experience starting out with something strong.
Speaking of strength, has your perception of nicotine strength somehow changed with the smoking experience you have gathered over the years? Do you feel less sensitive to nicotine now compared to when you started?
I mean, I'm gonna say yes, but I was never one of those guys that it really hit me a lot to begin with. So it's odd for me. Like I would go out and we just buy tobacco and I could unless I was smoking bale after bale after bale of Lajero, then I'm like, okay, I can feel this. It's time for lunch. And in the beginning, when I would be down there doing that, I didn't drink coffee. So I didn't start drinking coffee till I was 50. So I just turned 58 a couple weeks ago. So there was, 8 years of coffee is all I had. So I would bring chocolate. And the people down in Nicaragua, so DR would make fun of me because I always had chocolate. But the funny part was not that I had chocolate, that I didn't drink coffee, because that was odd because they're putting coffee in your face. Like literally, I think there's a clock, like an alarm goes off. And then like this woman brings in coffee every 2 hours when you're blending cigars. And I didn't drink coffee. So I ate chocolate, but the chocolate was always melting. So basically I was that guy like licking melted Snickers bars out of there to try to clean my palate out. But the sugar would help a lot. So it was rare. It's been rare, but every once in a while I'll have a cigar, and I've probably got on one hand how many times I'm like, okay, that's what some people get when they get a lot of the nicotine, because it's intense, and you're like, okay, so if you like somebody, then hand them a sugar packet because that'll help right away. If you don't like them, then just find it out and enjoy watching them, and then tell them the sugar packet thing later.
Fun fact, Fred. I love the whole topic of trying to cleanse the palate, and I know you're a foodie too. I once saw a very interesting, very short documentary about Eric Ripert from New York City, world famous chef, and every day he would taste all the different sauces and demi-glace, whatever it is. There was
Mhm.
a whole battery of like 14 of them. And he would come in and taste all of them once for lunch or before the lunch service, of course, and
Mhm.
for dinner. And what he used before he did that is the shittiest, most industrial, bland, uninspired cheese. Think about that, a three Michelin starred chef who's one of the most
Really? And he's like
popular
grabbing
Persian
Kraft
chefs.
sliced American cheese or something.
And he used the most crappy American industrial shit cheese to adjust his talent because he said the one thing about this horrible cheese is it's so consistent that he immediately recognizes whether his palate is off or not. So every single day before he goes through that tasting, he takes a little piece of that crappy cheese and it immediately tells him whether his palate is sort of where it needs to be and whether it's properly adjusted. And I found that hilarious.
So you've just given me, after all these years, the intelligent way I'm going to describe why a lot of times I drink Diet Pepsi when I smoke cigars. You've just given me the credibility now. So I appreciate that. That's interesting.
Amen to that. What do you think of Pepsi Max? Does it somehow stand up to Diet
I, I
Pepsi?
don't I just have Diet Pepsi. And that's why I started coffee because I used to drink like 8 or 9 of them a day. And it's why I started drinking coffee and now I just have 1 can of Diet Pepsi a day. That's all, sometimes I'll have 2 if I'm out, but yeah, it's horrible for you. I mean, it's all horrible for you. I mean, I don't know. It's all bad.
Very true. But well, this is the perfect forum to talk about, how can we all, rave about the government trying to improve our lives and make us super healthy, live to 200, and remove all the fun from life.
Right, right, right.
Um, Fred, I have to give you credit. This was sort of the most kickstart conversation we ever had on the show. And usually people try to be smart during interviews, and you think about what's the one question he never heard on a podcast or when somebody was trying to interview him, and let's be super smart about that opening question, and then it all just goes sour from there if it wasn't already to begin with. But for everybody who's not familiar with Fred Rewey joining us today, you have had a quite successful marketing career before joining the cigar industry. You ran your own brand, Nomad Cigars, sold it in 2018, if I'm not
Mhm,
mistaken,
mhm,
and most recently you were with Illusione Cigars.
mhm.
But it wasn't so long ago that the news hit that you would venture off to new endeavors and I'm very curious to learn about what you have installed, if you can talk about any of that. But of course, we also have to dig a little bit into your past. The tough question to start with. Um, you as a marketing expert, when looking at the cigar industry, how bad is it truly? I mean, and the way I frame it like that is, not to be offensive, um, but the cigar industry is so wonderfully old-fashioned in the sense that
Yeah.
it feels like we're still sending faxes to each other for order taking and
Mhm.
whatever it is. And I love that about the industry, For me, the cigar is the perfect product for our time because it is all about time. It is about the analog moment. It's about appreciation, sitting down, taking time for yourself or for a great conversation with somebody else. And it's the antithesis to pretty much everything that's happening in the world right now. But when you, with your marketing lens, look at the industry, what comes to mind?
There's a couple things. One is that I think you have to go out of your way to make a poor cigar now. I think that just the refinement of from seed to store and everything has gotten so good. So there are so many good cigars out there right now. I think a lot of this business has to do with marketing, and I think it's a greater percent. And I say it's like 70%, which really pisses off other people I know in the industry that make cigars. And I'm not saying there aren't better cigars than other cigars. There absolutely are. And I'm not saying there's not better cigars for you than there is for me because we have different palates. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of good cigars out there. And we've all seen great cigars die on the shelf because the name was weird, the packaging was weird, nobody liked the colors, whatever it is. And then we've seen marginal, B tobacco cigars make a killing and people smoke them all day long. And we're kind of like, what's going on? So from a marketing standpoint, I don't think it's any harder because there's not so many industries where you're literally like 3 inches away from your competitor and they're all vying for space. So as a cigar smoker, there's never been a better time to be a cigar smoker. I mean, you can walk in and you can really, if you have a well curated shop, and especially if you've got somebody that's working there that can help you and kind of lead you around, you're going to have a great experience no matter what. You bring up a very good point from another standpoint, which is actually something we should probably think about double downing on. One is that this is a grounded event long before we had social media, long before we had computers and iPhones, and everybody worries that your phone's tracking you and the government's tracking you and they're going to go to the I paid Apple $1,400 to track me. I get it. I mean it is what it is. But everybody's on their phone, so we've lost those conversations. So even more so in the last 15 years, are people more disjointed and you think everybody's living their best life because you're seeing, you're going through your Instagram feed and everybody's having wonderful food and wonderful vacations. And, I'm so glad I didn't grow up during this period because that's all a marketing thing. We've all seen people walk around, you're going, on vacation somewhere and you see someone by themselves and they smile, take the photo, and then they're done taking the photos and they're just looking depressed again and they're walking around, but they post their, what's supposed to be their best life. So there's cigars, to your point, it slows everything down. I mean, I don't see, like in shops, you can actually have a real conversation. And so I think that's something that I think could potentially become more attractive, almost in a weird old timey nostalgia way. It's like the guy that goes out and go, hey, I have vinyl records, it's like, oh, because you want that, you don't know it, but you want this other era. And cigars kind of give you that other era, even though that era has never gone around. We've been here the whole time, but hey, come on, join us. And then the third thing, I think, from a marketing perspective, where I actually think we've blown it, and I've had this conversation quite a few times, particularly in the U.S. when we had the FDA issues and things like that. We keep taking up the wrong argument as we see more tobacco type laws come in and anti-smoking laws come in. We need to be respectful of non-smokers if they want them to be respectful of us. And I got in a lot of trouble a couple of years ago because I made the comment about not taking your picture in front of a no smoking sign and posting it and stuff like that. And the fact of the matter is, we just look like assholes when we do that. Sorry, I don't know that word in French, so I'm just going to stick to the English version. But we do. We look like jerks because of the non-smokers. You're basically not respecting whatever their area is. If Starbucks decides to have non-smoking in their patio, then they will reap the benefits or repercussions of making that business action the same way we don't want people to manage us. So the argument that we keep going down as far as that's a non-issue. Let us have our space. Let us have your space, whatever it is, and be respectful of both. The other part of that, I think, is that we keep getting into this medical argument. We keep getting, they hire their doctors and we hire our doctors and stuff like that. And I think it's the wrong argument. The right argument is it's a freedom issue. I don't believe people should be eating, Starbucks, donuts every morning or Krispy Kreme or fast food, but I'm not going to tell them what to do. As long as the FDA, which, by the way, I don't have a problem with the FDA. If the FDA wants to make sure there is not something foreign in a cigar that should not be there, i.e. chemicals, tainted, whatever, I'm all 100% for that because I believe that's the FDA and I believe that's Europeans' equivalent of the FDA, what they should be doing. But if it's not going to be an illegal product, then just leave me alone. Just leave me alone. So don't have the medical argument. Have the argument of it's a freedom issue, because then you have alliances. You go to other communities that are also fighting a freedom issue. Everybody's always going to be behind a freedom issue, whether they believe in or participate in your cause or not. They're going to back you because you've reduced it to that. The medical argument, you're never going to win. And believe me, there's a million other things we could argue about if you're going to talk about medically, food, stuff that's in our food and stuff like that. But we don't have the lobbying money. And this is turning into a way too long of an answer, isn't it? But I just think we have the wrong argument on it. So those are I guess 3 areas to answer your marketing question.
So when thinking about marketing, Quick little sidestep yet again. I just attended a conference primarily focused on the hospitality industry, uh, high-end cocktail bars, spirits, and one of my very good friends, Sean Finter, he's an incredibly accomplished hospitality professional out of Annapolis in Maryland. And he used to run a group of bars in Australia. Pardon, he's from Canada originally, and then settled in the U.S. He's now a full-time consultant and coaches a lot of the best people of the industry. And he gave a seminar, he gave a speech about marketing for hospitality professionals. And at the very beginning, he asked the question, so what is marketing, or what does marketing mean to you? And for him, he said it's just two very simple points. It's to create awareness for what you're doing and to build trust.
Mm-hmm.
Would you agree with that?
I would. I would also say the third component of his connection, though. You're trying to connect with your group. You're trying to have a tribe. Look, people
Exactly the
either
word that
have
he
to,
also used further down the
yeah,
presentation.
yeah. I mean, look, they either have to like you, want to hang with you, or they hate you, and those are the three groups they fall in. And some people are okay. And so what I found is that you can't run that middle ground, much like you can't blend a cigar for everybody, because if you do, you'll end up making nobody happy. I think in marketing, you have to pick your group. I think you have to be passionate about your group. And are you going to alienate people? And you have to be okay alienating people. You have to be okay getting up and going, you know what, this person doesn't like me. I hate that. I can't stand it. I mean, a stranger can send me an email and go, oh, man, I really hate you. And I'm like, God, what did I do? You know, and it's like, why am I giving this person this power? I mean, there's no reason. So you have to be outspoken. But I think in marketing, I think it's that connection. And I think that's what's lost when I look at the cigar industry sometimes. Businesses that are stuck, and I'm not going to name companies here because they're friends, but people that have had companies for a long time, that their advertising, their marketing, which marketing is just, hey, marketing is just the what's my communication between the company to the end consumer? How is that message going across that telephone line or magazine or whatever it is like that? And does it make a connection? And I think some of them are very stuck in an audience that does not exist anymore or is very minimal as opposed to what the new audience is. For example, and you guys are obviously, a lot of the people on here are very big with European market versus our market. Our market is not the same as your market. It's not. And so when we have international companies that say, hey, we're going to have one president in charge of Europe and US, guess what? It doesn't work, because if you make decisions based on European palates and social abilities and habits and things like that, and what they respond to, it's not the same here, and vice versa.
That is an excellent point, and I need to ask you as a follow-up on this. We sometimes discuss it with brand owners and manufacturers here. Do you think that the core offering, the promise that you put out as a brand, has to be purely what you believe in and what you want to propose to the market? So if you build the thing and then you see if it sticks, or would you say you have to start with the end consumer in mind, and you have to build something that will appeal to the people? Otherwise, it might be a nice piece of art, but you'll probably be a starving artist.
So I'm more of the camp. Look, when I had Nomad, it was just me sitting around for years and years with Avi Obazian and him telling me I needed to start a brand. And I'm like looking, at the shop behind me in Orlando, which is Jeff Borchwich's shop. I'm going, last thing we need is another brand, Avo. And he says, well, he says, well, just do it your way and tell your story. So I started in DR, and then I went over to Nicaragua, and I was basically just kind of going, okay, follow me. I'm going to tell you everything I do right, everything I do wrong. Check the ego at the border, because they're always going to know more. But I didn't create products for consumers specifically. I was just like, this is a cigar I like, and you find your audience and join me on this journey. And this is my interpretation of this, or this is my interpretation of that. And I was fortunate enough to, when I went to Nicaragua, to work with AJ Fernandez before really anybody else does. There was only two other people that were even in the factory other than AJ's own stuff. So if I was still making cigars, that would be like my ad. I would just literally have on my ad in a magazine saying, I worked with AJ before it was cool, because now everybody does. And that's great, because AJ is a phenomenal person. He was a phenomenal teacher. There were great stories of when I would go to grab tobacco and he's like, I went to get El Motepe because he had recommended it. And he's like, no, you got to go to the island first. And, you got to go check it out before you're allowed to touch it. And so, there's great experiences there. And I don't even remember where I was going with this now. I completely lost track because I started thinking of howler monkeys on Ometepe Island. See, that's the way my brain works.
Marketing to your audience.
Yeah, so it was really just you put out your interpretation and you find your audience and they come along with it. The only exception to that I would say that falls in that a little bit is when you see a hole in your portfolio and you say, okay, I don't have a cigar for this. And for me, it wasn't necessarily a strength issue. It was an occasion. So when I blended the C276, I wanted that for dinner, just layers and layers of different flavors and stuff like that. I wanted my Padron 64 type thing, which obviously I was not going to make that cigar. Nobody's going to make that cigar. They're the only ones capable, but I wanted something. So for me, it was occasion. I'm like, I don't have anything when I've just single malt and just came off of some, a steak dinner. What do I have? So you would fill that, but you're still not, you're filling for a segment of your palate. I think you have to blend for you and the people that like your style follow you along. I think if you just go for just a pure out money grab on it, I think that's a little tough. There was always a discussion on these shows about, what's boutique. And we've had, this comes around every 5 years. And I still think there's not a lot of things that I think I said right, but this is probably the only one. I said the definition, I think it was Coop that asked me what the definition I thought of boutique was. And I said, because everybody says, well, is it $1 million? A million sticks? Is it this? You're in 500 stores. And I said that I thought boutique was more of a mentality and more of how you approached on blending cigars. And so what my answer was, is I said, the moment of which you make a blend decision or a production decision based on the bottom line profit as to putting out the best cigar you possibly can, you're no longer boutique. So that was my definition of that. So I think that's how you're always blending for yourself or what you know is best. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't.
I also like the idea of creating products centered around a specific experience that you want to capture and you want to offer to the audience. Was that always the way you approached creating your products and your blends with Nomad?
God, no. God, I wasn't that. I didn't know what the heck to do in the beginning. I went down there and basically I went to DR first, and I'm like, I just want a cigar, and it was easier. So then when I went to Nicaragua, I was a little bit more like that, a little bit more thoughtful. Still didn't know enough though. I had no idea the rabbit's hole that would open up, because I'm like, someone's like, oh, you're doing Nicaragua, you should probably start with some jalapa in the blend because it's a good foundation. I'm like, okay, great, give me some jalapa. And then I'm looking at people that had lines, and I'm like, how do you have, 200 SKUs? How do you have, 80 blends out here when I'm sitting on 4 coming over to Nicaragua, and I can't imagine having twice this portfolio, let alone, I think I ended up with, 19 blends at the end. And then I realized is once you open up that rabbit's hole, it's like, okay, well, you want jalapa, but which farm do you want it from? What age do you want? Did you want it fermented at this temperature or that temperature? Did you want it from that side of the farm or the other side of the farm? Because, this one, it's sloped, and this one gets slightly, less water because it runs down to this side. I mean, so once that rabbit hole's open, because you're looking at Nicaragua, which is four predominant tobaccos regions, you're like, well, how do we get so many different cigars then? I mean, how's it even possible? And so then it became more to your point of, okay, what am I trying? Because I always approached it from a cooking standpoint, because I had a cooking background. I wanted to be a chef when I was young. So everything I did, and everybody likes to say, hey, it's super sophisticated, and we have these formulas for tobaccos, and what we're gonna do. Bottom line is you put a bunch of leaves on the table, you put them together, roll them, go, okay, that tastes like crap. Let's take this one out, let's put this one, and you keep swapping back and forth until you get to what you're going for. And the funniest one that I had put out was I put out a cigar that got good ratings. They said it should have been a little bit stronger. Well, if it should have been stronger, it would have been a different cigar. And so if I would sit down at the table to blend a cigar going, okay, in my mind, I want something that's later night, but I'm wanting a stronger cigar. And if you blended it, the idea for me was is that you took all the tobaccos that you thought were going to work. How could you construct or blend a cigar that all those tobaccos played together perfectly? They played their part. And if at the end of the day you did that and it wasn't the strength you wanted, the answer is not just throw in more Ligero and make it stronger. The answer is start over and start with something different.
When you say that you wanted to become a chef before you got into all these other things, how far in your culinary journey did you ever get? And what was the approach that you had when it comes to philosophies in the kitchen?
So I was very happy. So from a young age, I wanted to cook. So second I was 16, I started working in restaurants all the way through 22. As far as in the kitchen part, 21, I think. And I had got accepted to the California Culinary Academy, which at the time was actually difficult to get in. This is back in the 80s. So this was literally 2 letters of recommendations, had to be in the field. And to be honest, I got a little burned out and I got a little disillusioned when I'm looking at some guy that went through all that and he was, a line sous chef that had dreamed of opening his own restaurant. So I realized that I think I didn't, it wasn't until then, and unfortunately I'd spent a lot of time in it, but it's a great hobby for me. I didn't think it would be fun once it became a business, once it became my job. So like during COVID, I ordered stuff from all over the place. And, I cook at home a lot. We bought a house 3 years ago here on the water in Florida, and I had the whole kitchen completely gutted and turned into a chef kitchen so I could do what I wanted to do. So I love it. And so when I approached the idea is what flavors do you want? And then you either find complementary flavors or you find contradictory flavors and go, okay, if I eat this and this is going to be a totally different part of the palate. So when I went to go blend, that part probably wasn't as hard for me. Like everything I thought would be easy was hard and vice versa. That part wasn't as hard for me because I was already going with that palate approach of, what flavors do I want? So it was all about flavor. It was never about strength. It was never even about what tobaccos to use. It was always about flavor. And so that helped me when I was blending. And I had one that had 6 different tobaccos in it. And I remember going to AJ. And I used to have, I'd work with the guy all day and I'd fill out the blend and I'd have it and I'd bring it to AJ at the end of the day. And AJ would take the piece of paper from me and he would scratch this out and go, no, do 3-year instead of 4-year, do this. And mark it all up like a high school or grade school paper. And I remember one time I gave him a blend and he looked at it, he says, that's a very good blend. And he hands it back to me. I just felt like the kid that needed to put it on a magnet on my refrigerator or something like that. It was just a weird moment, but it was all just about swapping out tobaccos for flavor. And I remember when I had the 6 tobaccos in there, that's when AJ said, he said, it's good. And I said, no, it's missing something. I said, there needs to be this underlying note, it's like that fleeting type note. And he says, try taking out a half leaf of the jalapa you have in there and put in like a quarter leaf of ometepe or whatever it was. And that's when we went down the ometepe road, which I loved.
When he graded your blend recipes, what was his criticism based on? Because obviously your palate must have been very refined already at that moment. And when you look at an industry with a fresh set of eyes, like you with a culinary background coming into cigars, I often think that's not only refreshing, but can be very successful. Was it the technical performance of the cigar that he was criticizing because it wouldn't burn well, or it had, combustion issues because of just the oiliness of the tobacco, the way it's constructed?
I think AJ, and I didn't know it at the time because I thought it was just a failure on my part going, well, okay, why won't this tobacco work? And there was a cigar, by the way, that everybody told me not to make that ended up doing really, really well. But that's because no one had done it for a long time. I did one called the Connecticut Fuerte. And my idea was I was sick of Connecticut's that didn't have any kind of strength to them. So I took some Connecticut and I put a very small amount of Ligero in there. And I remember because I was at AJ's and AJ's got the house next to his factory. And there were a bunch of retailers there and they were all smoking it. And they said, it's great, but don't do it. You'll fail absolutely miserably. And I'm like, I don't care. I like it. And I put it out. So I think at the time when AJ was evaluating the blends, I thought it was that type of misstep I was making. But in reality, AJ had the ability, I think, and obviously still does, he knew what it would be once it got through the aging period. you can smoke it right there. But he knew something, there was something in the selection of what I had. And I didn't learn a lot of that so much later. Anytime I would play with a tobacco I'd never used, it took me at least a year to get my arms around that tobacco. Not only what the tobacco tasted like right there at the rolling table, but what it would taste 6 months out, a year out. So my process was always the same. My process was I would have a blend. I'd come up with about 4 iterations of that type of blend. And then I would have 50 or 100 of them rolled. I would keep half of them at the factory. I'd bring half of them back to my house. And then I would start smoking them after about 45, 50 days, depending on what type of blend it was, longer if it was a stronger cigar, and then see how they played out. So I think AJ was just looking at more of that, and also knowing that, hey, this tastes good right now, but in 4 months, this tobacco is going to run away with it, or this wrapper is going to run away with it, and you're not going to taste any of the other components. So I think looking back, I think that's what a lot of his suggestions were.
I heard a lot of people say that they were passionate about cooking, they wanted to become a chef, but the moment they realized what the professional career of a line chef or whatever your position might be, once you figure out that's what the actual job looks like, they wanted to have nothing to do with that, no business. Did you ever feel that you being a cigar enthusiast, a passionate cigar smoker with a marketing background, entering the industry, did you ever feel the same way that you lost the passion because the business aspect was coming into play?
No. Well, I mean, I'm gonna say no with a qualifier. So, no, because I felt like the kid in the Make-A-Wish Foundation. I felt like I won the lottery, and all of a sudden I was going down. And I think that's why people uh, kind of I've always been very open. Like I said, I've always said what I did right, what I did wrong, and here's my journey. And I used to have these stupid emails that went out that were just more embarrassing to me than anything, but they were real. And I think that was refreshing to some people. I never speak bad about anybody. I never say anybody's blend's horrible, because you know what? Somebody likes it. These people work very hard. So I didn't lose that. The only time I lost that was really about the time that I sold Nomad. And at that point, I didn't mind the business of it, but the fun part of the business was getting sucked out. The FDA at the time was, we already did the math. I had my attorneys, my accountants, like, okay, if the FDA does this, what's it going to cost me? And it was roughly $1.2 million was the estimate for me to get through FDA's requirements and still have my cigars on the shelf. I got that down to about 700 because I thought, okay, well, I'll trim some of the portfolio. I'll be down to here. And my concern was never, the money of getting to the other side, because I thought, well, if I get to the other side, there's going to be a lot of guys that don't. My concern was, if that door is open, what are they going to require the next year? I mean, okay, I can get through this hurdle, but there's no guarantee they won't come back. Okay, now we want this, and it's going to cost you another $1 million. Now we want this, it's going to cost you whatever. So between that and just all the legal stuff that started happening, and we were in lounges. I couldn't hand out cigars to anybody. I couldn't sit there and just, hey, try this. And, I brought some cigars, try this, So I lost the fun of it. So that part of it, to your point, really was all of a sudden a business side that I'm like, look, this isn't fun. This isn't why I started it. I started it because I love cigars. I was a cigar enthusiast that just got lucky and started to make some cigars, just got lucky and started selling a lot of cigars. And it was never a business. I didn't need it for a job that way. So then once all of a sudden you start putting all these rules and regulate, and I'm on the phone with my attorney every week because, California wants warning labels. Okay, no, they don't want warning labels. Okay, no, they do. They want, now they want, these warning, so it just wasn't fun anymore. So I wasn't looking to sell. And then when I got the phone call and they asked if I would, I'm like, you know what? I'm totally cool going back and just smoking cigars. I'm okay. I've met great people. I'll figure out something to do or not do. I don't care. I'm okay just going to events and smoking cigars. I just love the environment. I love the people. I love how I can walk into a lounge where nobody knows me and I don't know them, and we can have great conversations, solve the world's problems, go home, show up the next night, and it's all messed up again, and we got to start over.
I couldn't agree more with that. Speaking of passion and the professional aspect and how you balance that, with your experience in the marketing world and then your passion for cigars almost forcing you into venturing into the cigar industry, when you look back now at the way you built Nomad, would you say it was a prime example of how somebody with a marketing background should build a brand and bring, some finesse in terms of marketing to the cigar industry? Or would you say you just got carried away with the passion aspect and didn't follow the rule book?
I think I followed the rule book pretty good. So there's a division. You have to make a decision as a company. Are you going to be the guy, or is the company going to be the guy? So there are
Mhm.
people I know in the industry that they do a million events and they keep out doing a million events. And I didn't want to be that guy. I mean, I think everybody ends up on the road a little bit more than they want, but there are guys that are just road warriors. The problem with that is that does the cigar survive without them there? So when they're not there doing events, does the cigar still sell? Because look, a lot of people can sell an event. Some people are better at others, but if you do an event, there's some sort of deal or whatever, people are going to buy your cigars. But are they buying? So it was always the third and fourth order. When you opened up a new shop, they ordered your cigars. Great. They reordered your cigars because the people went to the lounge and go, hey, this is new. I'll try it. And okay, we got to restock the shelf. It was the third and fourth order when you knew you started to get traction.
Yeah.
And so you have to make a decision. Are you building something that exists outside the person, which is tougher to do? So I had the easier route. I was the first person to put my Twitter handle on the outside of the band. That was a complete accident. I'd like to say that I came up with that marketing thing, and I kind of did, but it was 2013. I was smoking a cigar with a guy outside that I didn't know. And I went inside to use the restroom, and I came back out and he says, hey, I looked you up on Twitter and I just followed you. And I thought, well, that's interesting. What an interesting way to connect with cigar smokers, because Twitter doesn't work for a lot of things because it's a blip on a radar and it's worldwide and everything else. Well, it's X now, obviously. Sorry. I'm still calling it Twitter. And it was a way to connect. So I took the easier route because I was one-on-one connection. If someone responded to me, if someone walked into a shop, my philosophy always was, if someone walked into a shop and they bought 3 cigars, because either that's their budget or their time frame or whatever, and one of those cigars were mine, I owed them the best experience I could to make them the best possible cigar I could. I owed them, if they sent me a message, to respond to that message personally. So that's a much easier route to go than trying to have a company that wants to just be an entity in an industry. If you think about, lounges, in an industry that is so people oriented and so connection oriented, to build a brand that survives just on its reputation. And it's not that it can't be done. It absolutely can be done. It's just a harder road. It would be a much harder road to go on as a boutique. And I think if I wouldn't have went that classic marketing route, I think it wouldn't have been as successful.
Was that also part of the question, whether the cigar should be called Fred Rewey or, Nomad?
No, God. Someone sent this thing out today. So there are like 2,600 people named Fred right now in the United States or whatever. It's like, it's not a big name. It's a horrible name. I would never, people that have the name Fred go by their middle name, and my middle name is equally horrible. So it's like, I have no choice to go by Fred. But no, it was never, I chose the node Nomad because in my mind, we could go into different lounges and it was always the same experience. Every lounge thinks they're somewhat unique, in that they think their cast of characters is unique. You have you have the guy that's got a lot of money that has to make sure everybody knows he has a lot of money. He's got to have a brand that make sure everybody sees the label and make sure everybody knows that he bought a box of whatever because it came in. You've got the guy that is this silent zillionaire that just sits there and he just looks like he just got off work at an auto shop or something. Nothing against auto shop. I'm just saying he's not dressed in a suit and stuff like that. And that guy actually has more money than the other guy, but he doesn't need to show off. He doesn't need to talk about his cars. You've got everybody in between, but the lounges are the great equalizer. We can all sit down and talk to each other. And so everybody has those stereotypes or whatever in the lounge, and you know who they all are. There's one guy that's a complete asshole. If you don't know who that person is, then it's probably you. But every lounge has that same makeup. So you can go to another lounge, and if you're there for a while, you're like, oh yeah, you're the rich guy that everybody needs. You got to show everybody. You're the guy that really actually has a lot of money because you don't say a lot, but so everybody has that. And it's that familiarity that I love. So Nomad was about being able to just go wherever. I wanted Nomad for 2 reasons. From the very beginning, when everybody says you can't work with multiple factories, I wanted to go to different factories to make the cigars that I wanted to make. AJ was my first choice in Nicaragua after Noel Rojas had showed me around and taken by tobacco and stuff. And I had the meeting with AJ, and I've told this story a million times, but I'll make it short. AJ was clearly going through the meeting because of who set up the meeting. He wasn't going to make a cigar with me. It wasn't going to happen. It was just, like he wasn't making cigars for anybody back then, really. So he was throwing me softball questions. He's being very courteous. He's talking about there's only so much A tobacco and blah, blah, blah. And then he asked me, he said, well, what are you thinking of sizes? And I realized at this moment, and I don't know if that was the stand-up comedy background or whatever, but I realized that I have no shot. And so I knew AJ had the San Latano oval, which is one of the things that attracted me to the factory. And I knew that was kind of his thing, his patent, his deal. And so I basically just said, I'm thinking of making ovals. And he looked at me like, who the F are you? And then he realized I was joking, and he's like, screw it, let's go make a cigar. And so my whole first cigar was a Sumatra that was basically, look, whatever you say, AJ, we get done making a Sumatra. And he says, you know what, we're smoking at the end of the day. He says, we should box press this. And I'm like, oh, AJ, I don't know. I mean, my first Nicaraguan, some people don't like box press. He's like, oh yeah, Padron doesn't sell any box press. Don't worry about it. And like, okay, so let's box press it. So my whole first cigar is basically like, dude, whatever you say, whatever you say. And he was right. It was actually great. So he was amazing to work with on that way.
But when you look, I mean, you said it before, and you hit the nail on the head. When you walk into any semi-decently curated walk-in humidor these days, there's fantastic cigars on the shelf, and I fondly remember listening to one of your old interviews, probably in the early tens, and back then you already said, the last thing anybody needs is another cigar brand or another cigar on the shelves.
Yeah.
And it's probably more true now than ever before, right? With the quality of product that we have. On the other hand, when you think about social media, how it works, and how tobacco is severely restricted on all these platforms, you have to build organic fellowship and followers and the tribe, as you said, for your product. Do you think that in today's day and age you can stand out with just a great quality product which will eventually prove itself? Or is it that you have to scream loud and fast and be everywhere, and then proof's in the pudding, but as with all good marketing, it just exposes you. It doesn't make you better or worse, but it just tells everybody who
Well,
you are.
yeah, I mean, nothing will kill a bad product faster than good marketing.
Exactly.
But I think you do have to make some noise. I think there are just so many cigars out there now that just having the great cigar. Look, there are exceptions, and there are companies that I can look at that I think have done a fabulous job that really was word of mouth, that really the brand started getting out there and started getting more and more traction and stuff due to that. But I think that's very rare. I think that I think that's tough. I just think, you walk into any well curated shop and you're looking at all those facings, and you always have that guy that, hey, you used to smoke, whatever. Oh, I forgot about that cigar. I love that cigar. And so there's just this distraction. If the FDA had any upside, it slowed down a little bit of that, hey, what's new? What's new? I mean, you'd literally be in an event with your new cigar and go, hey, what do you got coming next? And I'm like, dude, I just came out with this one. What do you want? So that was a little bit of the consumers and a little bit of the manufacturers falling into that trap, because it used to be, you put out one cigar a year, maybe you did two, and then all of a sudden you're releasing four, then you've got LEs, then you've got all the other stuff, and it's a totally different model. So the distraction became real. So if the FDA did anything well for us, it kind of slowed that down. And I think I heard it from Clint Aaron, who used to have 262, and he said, look, it's not what's new out, it's what's new to you. What have you not tried? I would say we could stop making new cigars right now. And, whatever new cigar you have that you say, oh my gosh, this is groundbreaking. There's never been a cigar like that. I can take guys that have tremendous palates and background, like a Steve Saka or, these other people that have way better palates than me, and some of the bloggers, and they'd say, well, this tastes exactly like this cigar that was out 10 years ago or whatever it is. So, I mean, it's really just going through and just, seeing what's good for you. And we keep, the person that's running a shop, your job is to get them what their best new experiences is. We're in a customer service business if you run a shop. It's a customer service. Starbucks knows they're not in the coffee business. They're in a customer service business that happens to sell you coffee. If you're running a cigar shop, your job is to try to put them in their new favorite cigar. Their new favorite cigar may be a cigar that's been on the shelf for 15 years. And I look at a lot of great cigars that are on the shelf that people just walk by. I'm like, you're really missing out. This is a fabulous cigar. But there's nothing screaming at them, either packaging wise or marketing wise. We have a tendency, particularly in this type of environment, where our universe of social media, of lounges like this, of bulletin boards or chat rooms or whatever like that, our audience is a very small microcosm of the entire cigar smoking market. I mean, we're probably at best 15% of the whole market. The guy you don't see is the guy that walks into a lounge, buys a box of cigars, and goes home. So we sometimes get a little bit of a skewed idea that, oh, everybody only smokes, strong cigars, or everybody only smokes Nicaraguan cigars. Well, you can argue Nicaragua and Dominican, they go back and forth. Dominican probably gets the edge on production, but they're very, very close. But if you just took this world, you go, well, I would assume Nicaragua sells 10-1 over Dominican, because I never hear about Dominicans in the chat rooms. No one's raving about that. But then you take, the Cien Años La Aurora or whatever, an amazing cigar that's Dominican. You take some of the Davidoffs, you take, some of the Casadas, you take, some Alitos. I mean, there's amazing cigars out of there. It's just a different tobacco, and finding out when does it fit when is the right time to smoke that.
Hmm. How do you think that the evolution of marketing in general, mostly because of the advent of the internet and social media, and how it has all transformed over the last, well, barely 15 years, right? It's remarkable how fast this whole evolution has become. And now with AI, it seems like we just pushed another accelerator, and God knows where it's going to go. How do you think cigar manufacturers and brand owners can continue to be successful in this very challenging marketing environment, and not only get the word out, but successfully communicate in a meaningful way to their audience and new audiences potentially, of course?
Well, I think shows like this are fabulous. I mean, I think this is something that people start to see, and so I think the video aspect of everything online has been a huge changeover to getting that voice and seeing cigar makers as real people with problems and things like that. One of the off years, I guess it was last year or the year before, I did a series of interviews that I called The Final Puff, and it's just I didn't know what I was doing at the time, and I thought, okay, well, I want to do something to give back. So I sat down with like Carlito Fuente for an hour, and I sat down with Lido and the Casadas, and I had this list of people that I went down. And my only goal is I really only wanted to be 40% cigars and 60% their lives. It ended up being closer to probably 70% cigars, because you can't avoid it. But I think things like that, things like this show, I mean, you go back 10 years, forget about the technology aspect of it. Your only interpretation, or your only understanding of a cigar maker or a blender, was what you read in a big magazine that was a carefully curated Q&A, that all the answers were done with a response. So when you get kind of these shows that are more freewheeling, you get to see them as real people and what they struggle with and things like that. I think that's a huge part of the connection. I think these shows have been phenomenal. I think there's some, this show and some other ones are really, really good at helping make that connection to the cigar maker that may not be comfortable doing their own podcast or something like that. And I think that those have been really, really helpful in consumers seeing, and they want to peek behind the curtain. They want to see what it's like.
And I have to applaud you and congratulate you. What you've done with The Final Puff, I enjoyed it from the first second to the last, throughout all the episodes.
Thank you.
I think it's phenomenal, and I really enjoyed it. Allow me to play devil's advocate on the other hand, though.
Yeah.
Here comes the monstrosity that is the algorithm of TikTok, paired with people's attention span going down to sort of like this, right? And we're talking about long format content where you're sitting through a conversation for an hour, and it's fabulous, and you and I might love it, but Do you think that has a future with the next generation where, if it doesn't if it doesn't grab you like in the first second, swipe, gone.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a great hurdle, and and I don't have the answer. The analogy I can use for it is that in the late '80s, for about a 10-year period, I did stand-up comedy, and this is before there was stand-up comedy and television. So when you went and watched a comedian, you typically saw somebody open for about 15 minutes, then you saw the next person for 20, and then you saw the headliner go for an hour or maybe over an hour, and they would lay hooks early in the routine for something that wouldn't come up till much, much later in the routine. And then you'd already been kind of, the seed had been planted. And then when TV came along and the Comedy Channel and things like that, it killed that long format stand-up comedy, because now everybody's just watching, well, let's it's Comedy Channel do like 30 seconds of this guy and 45 seconds of this guy, and then it would just keep going. I don't know. The attention span issue is real. The only solace, I think, I don't even know if it's the right word, that I have in it is basically going back what the core depth of our industry is and the core philosophy. I don't know that person that is nonstop, getting bites is necessarily what we love about the industry. We love sitting down. We love having real conversations. We love having conversations of things that aren't necessarily favorable, politics or whatever. And you can have people on different sides of political spectrum that can have a nice, courteous debate in a cigar shop and agree to disagree. We've lost that agree to disagree. So I like to think that that a little bit of the long format can still exist because of what our being is and why we smoke cigars to begin with. Sometimes you smoke a cigar in a lounge and you want conversation. Sometimes it's a very social event for you. Sometimes you just want to sit around and be outside and be by yourself on the deck, and you don't want a thing to worry about. And back what I was saying earlier, as far as that we've had this, when we go down that medical argument of what's good for you, well, the leading cause of death among guys is stress. I don't know a lot of stressful cigar smokers. We go, we smoke a cigar, we relax. I don't think about work. I talk to guys that I've smoked with for 15 years. I don't know what they do for a living. I don't care what they do for a living. We don't talk. They don't care what I do. We just go and relax. And so sometimes it's a different experience. Sometimes it's very social. Sometimes it's very reflective. And that is the core of who we are as cigar smokers. So, yeah, there are people that make fun videos, cigar related, on TikTok, but I don't think that's the core of what the cigar smoker is.
Now, one could argue that the demographic change and evolution will probably pose a certain threat to that. But I'm a diehard optimist, right? And I'm as passionate about cigars as it gets, like yourself. And I really want to believe that everything you said is fundamentally true and the foundation of the industry. With your experience in marketing, do you believe that if you're as stubborn as we were just discussing, and you fundamentally believe in what you think the core value of your offering is, and in this case, speaking about the industry as a whole, do you think that's viable and sustainable, in the sense that if you just believe in it enough and you stay true to it, it'll succeed?
I do. I think part of it is I have to. I mean, like, I have to hold on to that. And the other part of me is, look, we're not that big of an audience. We're not that big of a tribe. So we're not asking for billions of people to come to our way of life. We're asking for our subsection to have this philosophy, our subsection to have this. So at the end of the day, are we threatened by some of that stuff? I mean, maybe a little bit on the fringe, but I still believe that the core reason people smoke, this core reason that people get together and smoke or get on something like this, I don't think that's going to change, because we're looking for a connection that is not the noise. I don't watch reality shows because reality is enough of a problem. I don't need an entire show based on reality. Just entertain me with a show, entertain me with a movie, but I don't need to be, I don't need all the drama with it. That's what I love about this industry. So I think we're always going to have our core audience. And I think what's going to happen is as it keeps vamping up, to your point, TikToks of the world and things like that. I mean, look, it used to be, I don't remember what the stat was, so I'm totally making up the numbers, but it used to be in movies like the camera would only change angles once every like 18 seconds or something like that. Now it's like every like 4 seconds. And people are conditioned for very rapid fire of everything. And I think that we're not that audience. And I think what's going to happen is as that keeps going, we're going to find more of our own tribe. We're going to find, and we see it now. We see new cigar smokers come into a shop that a friend brings them in and says, wow, this is great. We're just relaxing. We're not on our phones. There's no drama. There's no stress. So I think we're always going to keep finding our audience if that's the message and the culture we keep portraying.
And I also think we have a certain responsibility to protect that and perpetuate that wherever we go, whether it's in a lounge with the conversations that we have, or even on social media, to try and stay away from all the drama, because God knows, even in the cigar industry, there's plenty of people trying to stir up some shit.
Sure.
Nobody really needs when all you want to do is light up a cigar and have a great hour for yourself or with somebody else sharing that experience. Macy has a question for you. Good to see you, Macy. Welcome.
My pleasure. And let me say, Mr. Rewey, I had just what an immense pleasure it really is for me. Let me go fanboy.
Thank you.
Final puff, everything.
Thank you.
I love your demeanor.
Thank you.
Some of the interviews you've done. So from one long-term cigar nerd to maybe the king of them.
Wow.
What was it? Range World? I'm not worthy. I'm trying to.
No. Look, I just
and
like
honestly, in
cigars,
Chewing, couple of things you brought that Cien Años, and that was better than La Vitra. I mean, that was good. I got a box of those put away. If they weren't so low, I would get them out and be shown bragging right now. But
we all have that. I mean, look, I'm a tobacco geek first and foremost, and I was actually at Pro Cigar when they handed that out before it came out, and I wasn't familiar with it. I lit it up, and I'm like, there's just some of those cigars. You're just like, wow, what is this? This is really, really good. So there's a lot of those great cigars out there. So when you get to a shop that knows their way around and knows your palate, they can definitely steer you in some of that stuff that's been around a while.
I got to give Cigar Coop credit on that one. And we've had some debates on some of his calls, but that one he was spot on. And you talked about Jeff Borshowitz. I think I bought his very last box off of his website of that cigar. There are only singles available now, folks. Anyway, just to show, ladies, look at this. I got my quarter from the Amicus Brew. We're about to go. Can we go deep FDA for a second? Is that all right? Or does no one want
It's not my show. I don't make the calls. I don't care.
I got licensed, got the briefs. I filed an amicus brief for a group called the Heartland Institute in the appeal. So just to say, I'm not bullshitting you. And I liked how you talked about marketplace of ideas and friendly disagreements, because if we may, I would like to have one of those now and present a counterpoint of something you said earlier for your consideration, because I do think, in particular, you talked about the medical stuff and I'm with you, I'm a hardcore libertarian, and we got to pursue these liberty-based arguments. But you talked earlier about how you thought it was a mistake to pursue the medical arguments. And if I may, I would like to present the counterpoint to that argument, because I think it's an important point to get out there, if I may. So first of all, and by say we, the CRA, CAA, PCA, the litigants in the case, but all of us, because we all did win, quite frankly. But we won at the district court level 100% solely, exclusively, and only because of what I would consider a medical argument. That argument being what the court calls pattern of use, which is a fancy way of saying people use cigars basically less frequently, less often, and differently, don't inhale, but in that differences from that pattern of use between premium cigars and other tobacco products, that the FDA did not fairly and adequately address public comments submitted by the CRA on those differences, and that lumping all tobacco together was essentially the fatal sin. And the reason all of this was overturned, and I mean, just a nightmare, because your point about the regulation not stopping cannot be emphasized enough. That is 1,000,000% correct. That's mathematical, maybe 2,000,000% correct. So FDA was not going to stop, and the regulations that they had imposed or promulgated already were, Minato in a comment, Charles Halfwheel called my vaporware, and I quoted something from the brief, but it's not. I mean, we may not know the exact cost, but that's because the FDA also doesn't know how they're going to do this stuff. The testing, how do you store these? Who does the there's nothing for any of these regulations as far as actually implementing them, whether that be testing, whether that be the facilities regulations on the inspections and all the crazy requirements that they promulgated. But the win was because of the medical arguments, and the appeal is hinging on these medical arguments. And the brief that I wrote, that the Heartland Institute filed, that I'd love to send to you. And by the way, I know a lawyer who can do a lot cheaper work than some of the things you're talking about, and who actually fight these things. And so the medical, I mean, I agree the liberty stuff's important, but here's the deal. And sorry to go deep on this, but Congress in 2009, 10, whatever, the Obama administration, they passed that statute, the Tobacco Control Act or whatever, the act, and that gave deeming powers, a very unique statute in the sense that the statute doesn't say explicitly, okay, you can regulate this, you can't regulate that, kind of. It's like, hey, FDA, we give you power to deem tobacco products as you find necessary for the public health, and have at it. So it's like, well, imagine how that could possibly have problems, right? I mean, it's so clear. So the FDA then deemed and said, okay, premium cigars meet the standards, the health impacts are there, you know, the public interest is there, et cetera, et cetera. And so the fight has to be at this point on the medical stuff, to put it in eloquently, because until that legislation is repealed, or until and the key is we have to get a legislative from Congress exemption that says premium cigars with an actual definition of them in the statute, not from the court, and says premium cigars are set. And I think Judge Maida has a good definition from his opinion where he set that out. Because some cigars are regulated. People miss that point. Flavored cigars with a characterizing flavor, still regulated. If you short filler cigars, I think arguably could be regulated based upon the standards that have been set. Pardon me. I did just eat and I went off camera for you, so sorry. I'm a little. So I guess I just want to say respect. I think you're right. I think the liberty argument is what we need to make to get this exemption, but we will always be in the crosshairs of the FDA until there is some sort of legislative exemption that says FDA premium cigars are different. They're going to keep coming back, but I do think the FDA should keep losing, because the truth of the science is that premium cigar use is different. The patterns of use are diametrically opposed to other tobacco products. The health effects, therefore, consequent, if you're using it far less frequently, you're going to have less health effects. You know, beyond the pH issues from the fermentation and not inhaling, you know, to treat a cigar like a big cigarette's just crazy. So I know it's a pain. In a perfect world, we wouldn't have to do it. But in the battlefield that exists right now requires that we battle on the health and science. And quite frankly, we win on those arguments. That's why we won with a district judge who was appointed by Barack Obama. I mean, Judge Maida is not a shill for the cigar industry. If anything, I believe his perspective is kind of pro-regulator. I mean, I think he's reasonable, but so I feel good. The fact that we won with him, I think is good in the appeal, but it's ongoing. We could lose everything, which is just frightening. But anyway, I just think the medical stuff is crucial, and CRA knows what they're doing. Let me just say, seeing this from the inside, and actually, Michael Edney, the CRA's attorney, sponsored me to get me admitted so I could file this brief. And let me tell you, I've never worked with a smarter lawyer. So just my advice from the inside would be just do whatever the CRA and its lawyers say and fund the freaking CRA people. Like I'm telling you from the inside, just give the CRA what it needs. Listen to them. They are professionals. Look at their track record. Sorry, speech over, but thank you for what you do. And and you, I mean, you're a champion of the industry, and that's just some inside baseball that but I think the stakes, it's boring, but the stakes couldn't be higher on this.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate the thoughtful comment, and I'll say two things. One is that when I say the focus of it, the medical, obviously you have to take head on if that's what's being presented as their case. So to me, that's not a question. But to me, there are two fronts. There's the front that we have in the court system that's in there, that is filed, that went through the whole thing with the judge and stuff like that. And obviously we have to take that head on, and we did very successfully. There's also the court of public opinion, and that is a much broader audience. And so it's true of just about anything of nature. It's not always about being right. It's about having the most voice behind you on there. We can have many more champions on the public opinion, and all of a sudden, because those people in Congress and Senate and in different boards and stuff in different positions in the EU, they're trying to get reelected, and that's what they respond to. And the reason I came to that, by the way, and I have to give a shout out to a gentleman by the name of Christian Hudson and Jessica Hudson, have a shop called Just for Him in Springfield, Missouri, and they woke up and they had a lounge, and smoking was banned, and this is 10 years ago. The council just said overnight, can't smoke inside a shop. And the reason I have that opinion is that Christian went around afterwards and he got signatures from everybody to bring it back up again. And he got way more signatures from non-smokers than he did from smokers, because that's the reality. You're not going to convince the court of public opinion that these are different than cigarettes. All they know is they walk by and there's smoke. Matter of fact, if they walk by a cigar, there's probably more smoke in the air. Now, we can argue the medical, we can argue nicotine, because we don't put things like cigarettes do in there to help absorb it faster and all the other things that happen. But we still have an audience. We still have a front that if we can get the court of public opinion behind us, they don't have to like cigars. They just have to believe that we have the right to enjoy cigars. It's not an illegal product. So when I discount the medical aspect, I don't mean that from the court perspective, because we absolutely needed to take that head on, because those were the issues put point blank to us that we disproved very, very well. But the bigger audience, I think, that we can really get people behind us is going to be the court of public opinion. And that will weigh heavily on everybody that wants to get reelected, wherever they are in the world, to undo some of that and take the pressure off any administration or any politician going after it.
I could just, this is a great example of what you talked about, because I didn't.
By the way, Christian, got it back.
And I completely agree with what you're saying. And I think that distinction's important. And I also want to say I have evolved, or let me even say this. I've changed my mind. I don't know. I was wrong. Not many people can say that. I used to say, you know what, this responsible marketing stuff, why are we, people can call things what they want. Or I used to, the no smoking sign. But then I read these briefs from the so-called Truth Initiative and the Heart Lung Association, which I don't know, they should be worrying about hearts and lungs and not filing these crazy briefs. But then they talk about Nick Jonas on Cigar Aficionado, that's marketing to children. And I realized, like, this stuff actually is used against us. They found something from STG talking about selling, and like the examples that they found, there was Nick Jonas, STG in convenience stores, and a couple other so this stuff, so I have changed my mind on that, and you're correct on that point. Thank you.
Well, look, when the FDA came out, one of the first things they said publicly to everybody is, we finally have a vehicle to stop minors from smoking cigars. Okay, we have a vehicle to stop. They're not allowed to buy tobacco. It's the same way you have a liquor store that can't sell alcohol to a minor. And if they sell alcohol to a minor, they should be fined or shut down, or whatever the appropriate actions are legally on there. That was nothing new. So that was all of a sudden them, which they knew when they threw that out there. They just threw it out because it got public opinion. It got, well, who wouldn't say minors should not smoke cigars? We will say minors should not smoke cigars. So we do have to have both fronts on there.
Macy, thank you. And Fred, many thanks for your input on this. Brian, over to you.
Hello.
Hey,
I
Brian.
I have a less loaded question.
Why are you not on the hammock? Why are you not smoking a cigar on the hammock?
I have done it. It can happen. It's a little tricky because I have a drink and
and then you get ash all over you. I get it.
Yeah, the iPad needs to be plugged in, and I'm like multitasking. I'm also making chess moves, and stuff. So,
ooh, yeah. I love chess.
Maybe next week. Okay, so my wife, girlfriend, fiance, life partner, whatever you want to call her, is a stand-up. And so I'm curious, with your background and experience in that, how much does that kind of influence, your other endeavors? Like for me, I teach, I work with kids, and so, but many years ago, I did a lot of acting, and I feel like that has incorporated itself into the way that I teach, and all of that experience kind of influences how I come across, to the kids and how I say what I say. So obviously already today here, you've gotten some laughs. So I think in terms of like interviews and podcasts and things, I'm assuming that, quick wit and such kind of like comes in there. But how much, did that experience from your past, come into the marketing element, or, how you interact with, shop owners and other people in the industry, and et cetera, et cetera?
Look, I love humor, and like I said, I did stand up for 10 years and did it with really big name people that I mean, I didn't want to go around the country and, live out of motel rooms. And now I'm in the cigar industry where I can go around the country and live out of motel rooms. So I basically screwed up is what I did. But no, it's huge. When you do stand up, it's all you. You think you're going to do okay. Pass or fail, success or not, it's all you up there at that moment. I think it teaches you to look at things differently. I think it teaches you to be more open and more vulnerable. Don't get me wrong, every comedian has something. They didn't get enough hugs as a kid. They, whatever it is, they've all gone through all that stuff. They're all messed up people. But they have a way of kind of cutting through the noise to the core aspect of things. And look, humor is kind of a great equalizer. There's enough drama, like I said earlier, out in the world that humor is just one of those things. It's just fun. Everybody's got that person that they want to hang out with, and that is, no BS, no drama, and just have a good time. So yeah, I think that's a huge influence on my background. And I understand when I'm on shows, look, we can sit there and talk about blends, and it was kind of my impetus behind on the Final Puff thing is look, you get these guys on shows and they're talking about their next blend, and they're talking about the tobacco, and they're talking about, what priming and stuff like that. And that's all cool. And I geek out on some of that stuff, but sometimes you just want to know the person behind it and how they are. And so I just wanted to be that person when I would be on a show, and just be all the walls down, and just be okay with that. And it's also very freeing, because if you choose to be someone that you're like, this is my interpretation of how a cigar maker should be, or this is my interpretation of how someone in the cigar industry should be, then you are constantly filtering your thoughts. You're constantly going, oh, this is how they would answer that. This is how the textbook says I should answer that. And that's not exciting to watch. It's not fun to watch. It's very canned. I can read an article about that and be just get the information I need. So yeah, that was a huge part of my background that I never left. If you follow me on Facebook, they're all just stupid posts. They're all literally just observations of things, or I'll see somebody say something and I'm like, well, that could be funnier if you applied it to this. And that's all I do. I don't talk about politics. In the last 15 years of, like, say, Facebook or something, or Twitter, if I put something even remotely close to politics, the over under is like 5 lines before somebody says something absolutely stupid and pisses me off, and then I got to delete the whole post. So like I said, we're not in this industry because we love drama. We're not in this industry because of Real Housewives of, I don't know, Wells, Nevada or something. I don't know how many there are now. we're in this because we just want to chill. We just want to have a cigar. We want to make a connection. When I started in the industry, I looked at people that I wanted to model after, not be them, but I looked at people that I respected in the industry. I had the privilege of smoking with Avo, 4 or 5 times a week for a decade before I started the cigar industry. We never talked politics. We never talked sports. We talked about life and travel and books and all sorts of things like that. So then I looked at people outside the industry, or excuse me, people in the industry that had their own brands. And I looked at somebody like Jonathan Drew. And, look, it took somebody a little bit nuts to do what Jonathan Drew did. And I have a lot of respect for that guy. But I would watch him in an event, and he's a rock star. And there'll be 200 people in line to meet Jonathan at whatever event it is. And he talks to every single one, and he gives them their due, and he looks them in the eye. And even though he's burnt out and tired, he talks to every single one and makes that connection with them. And I have a lot of respect for people that get big and don't forget where they came from. Don't forget that guy that maybe bought, 5 cigars, and he's not going to move the needle. He's not going to change your production levels. He's not going to put you on a plane. But to that person, you made a connection and you made a difference. And I've made some of the best friends I've ever had in my whole life in the cigar industry that I just never would have known, And so it's that connection that's there. And a through line for me happens to be humor and just kind of that candidness. But for everybody else, it's something different.
Well, it's refreshing. It's like, I think, we're a little bit in a subsect of people here that really know a lot about cigars, and not everybody does. I mean, I'm not so amazingly super educated on the technical stuff. And so I appreciate, conversations about, that's why I asked about stand-up comedy. That's kind of, more my wheelhouse.
I'm not afraid to say what I don't know. So at one point I was at a shop in Texas, and I was told I'd only get like 2 minutes with the owner, and I ended up getting a lot of time. He asked me the best question, and he said, look, he says, I think I'll bring in your line. He said, but what makes you different than just another white guy with a cigar? Meaning I wasn't Cuban, I wasn't Nicaraguan, I was born in Wisconsin. It's not exactly a big, history of tobacco in my DNA. And I left with that, and I wrestled with that for about a year, because I'm like, okay, so what is my story? What and how do I take what I'm really doing and convey that to the audience? And what I came up with was a seminar that I did called Hacking the Blend. And the idea was was to take whatever cigar I had out and bring the 4 or 5 tobaccos as burritos, just rolled up, ometepe, just rolled up palapa, whatever. And we smoked through each one of those. And we talked about, and it was all from a cooking background. It was all like, okay, what flavors do you get? There's no wrong answers. And what flavors do you get? And would you smoke just that tobacco? And everybody's like, some of them they would, some of them they wouldn't. I go, okay. And then we would finish on the cigar that all those tobaccos went into, and go, okay, now smoke it and see that one tobacco, Piloto Cabano or something that you just like, were like, okay, but that was the foundation that kept the blend grounded so that the other ones should showcase. And so I approached that from a standpoint of zero ego. This is what I do. I just throw them all together. It ended up being a great experience for everybody, because one, you don't always get to try those tobaccos individually, but it ended up being a good experience. And that was nothing more than me just sharing exactly what I was doing in a no nonsense way. When I first started, I was a couple years into it, and I got great messages from Pete and JD and all these other guys. And one of the comments I would get from some people was like, look, you don't post enough on your social media of you smoking your cigar and saying how great your cigar is. I'm like, well, they know I like my cigar. I make my cigar. So I don't need to sit there and show a picture of me in a tobacco field smoking my cigar and doing it. Just they want to know the people. They want to know the story behind the blend and the people you met and things like that. And I found that to be, that candid conversation just kind of hit home with a lot of people.
Yeah, no doubt. This is right up Reinhardt's wheelhouse. He's been talking about.
And by the way, the first person I reached out to when I was going to make that was Jose Blanco, because Jose Blanco does a great seminar on the wrapper influence, and every centimeter, or what's the metric equivalent of 1.5 centimeters? Is that a thing? Is that 1.5 centimeters? I guess I don't. Yeah. But he has a great seminar where it's the wrapper influence, and he goes through, and he was the first person, and we're friends. And I reached out to him and said, hey, I'm thinking of doing this seminar for shops, but I don't want to step on your seminar. And he had great feedback. He says, absolutely do it. And he says, and then he gave me some great pointers of how to do it. And his first thing was, well, don't make up something if you don't know the answer. I'm like, well, trust me, I'm not going to do that. I'll just say I don't know.
Yeah. what are the little fumos? The little individual
Burritos.
Yeah, right. That I got to enjoy a couple with Reinhardt when we were in Napa. It's really fun.
David said David of ASP spoke at a rapper seminar at Pro Cigar, and he did, and it was awesome. I mean, the geeks that were in the audience of that.
Don't do this to me, Fred.
To have a grower on stage with Michael Herklotz talking about the growing of tobacco. We've never had, we always have the blenders, we always have the brand owners or and things like that. To have him on stage, which by the way, he never does that. He's only done that twice that I've ever known him to do it. And him and I talked about it for hours afterwards. Was just an incredible geek moment to hear that. And I loved it. And Michael Herklotz is awesome. I hate Michael Herklotz because he's like.
Can I retract my question? My question is what happened at the seminar?
Michael looks great. I hate Michael because Michael looks great. He knows everything. He's polished. He says everything. He can break it down to consumers in an unbelievable way. I hate him. I hate every bit about him, but I love him. But to have both those guys on stage was great. But just to hear everything from the growing perspective and delivering that tobacco was amazing.
Okay, I'm going to pitch you my show because you mentioned the housewives, so I have to bring it up. We have a bunch of plants in the yard, and we were going to film a little, YouTube series or something where they're like bickering, and the plants are like not getting along, and they're like bitching, and we're going to call it the Real House Plants of Burbank.
I love it. I would watch that. I mean, probably TikTok, as long as we're allowed to have TikTok. I don't have TikTok, by the way, but
I don't know.
I probably should.
Can you name drop, since you were so modest earlier, can you name drop some comedian that you worked with back in the day?
So I shared the stage with Robin Williams several times, Ellen DeGeneres, Paula Poundstone. I mean, this was when a lot of them were coming up. Rob Schneider. So they were all they were all there back then. This is back in San Francisco when it was the Improv, Holy City Zoo. Holy City Zoo is where Robin started, which was a horrible club to play because it was a bar that went down probably about, 50 feet that way. The stage faced this way. The bar went down that way. You had basically 12 people in front of you. So it was easy, I can tell you. So if I would do stand up like at the Improv or something, it was a pretty big crowd and laid out very well. It's much easier to do comedy in front of a large group than it is a small group, because a large group, you can kind of don't have to pick them out. You can kind of look at them out of a mass and do your routine, and everything in comedy is very well scripted. The better you are at it, the better you make it look like you're making it up as you go along, but you don't. You know every joke in every order, you know every pause. Occasionally you'll go off script a little bit, but for the most part, you've got a script. The Holy City Zoo is a great place because you had no choice. There's like, 40 people right there spread out all over. You had no choice but to make that connection with them. And that was very difficult. So I remember talking to Tom Kenny one point years later, and I hadn't seen him do stand up. And I'm like, Tom, I don't see you doing stand up. And he's like, well, I am the voice of SpongeBob. And I'm like, well, okay, I guess you're doing okay. I'm an idiot.
Yeah. Bethany likes that theater setting with a big crowd. She did musical theater, so she prefers that over the small club setting.
It's great. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, I was never not nervous when I went up. I especially the first time, the very, very first time I did it, Paula Poundstone was emceeing it. And she came up and asked how to pronounce my name. And I told her, and she says, well, what are you doing? And I gave her an idea of some of my material I was going to cover. I didn't tell her the jokes, but I told her what I was covering. She's like, well, good luck. That usually doesn't work, but hey, good luck to you. And it went well. It went great. She gave me a big hug afterwards, and it was a lot of fun. But yeah, it's an interesting environment. It was a lot of fun, and I miss it. And I have that outlet through just stupid stuff on Facebook or the stupid so long and thanks for all the bacon. I wrote a book that was basically an expanded version of the Facebook posts, which are nothing but my brainless thoughts. Don't buy the book, really, seriously.
It's so great. Bethany had to follow Robin Williams one time in Mill Valley at this place called the Throckmorton Theater, and it was just the coolest experience ever. Anyway, thanks.
It's not fun following him. Actually, the third or fourth time I was supposed to follow him, I literally told him right straight up, like the third or fourth time, like, dude, I'm going on before you. Like, not happening, not going on after you.
Cheers, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
And by all means, buy the book. It's hilarious. I love it.
It's pointless. It's completely pointless.
You know,
seriously, go read Shakespeare. Read something that's going to better your life. Seriously.
Well, don't we sometimes need, things, books that are just pointless, but still
Yeah.
great at the very core of it? Question for you, Fred. When you speak about stand-up, is it a natural talent or is it also an acquired skill that you can train?
It's both. I think you have to naturally have, look, I've seen comedians that weren't funny out of the gate, find their voice, find their footing, find where it is. And then I've seen some people naturally talented. I think the people that are straight up naturally talented have a difficult time at some point. And then there's also people that were back then that were, if you were super, super raunchy, that wasn't really as respected. And the reason was, and you would see comedians when they were testing out material, if they were losing the audience, they would skip to what we call dick humor. They would skip to something super raunchy. And you got the laughs. You got the laughs because, oh my gosh, that guy's on stage and he just said swear words or something like that. But you knew it was a little bit cheaper. You knew it was a cheap joke to get. The people that could go through an entire routine and for the most part not swear and do relatively clean material that are observational. They've just got that weird mind that, the common ground is if they could look at something that you've seen every day, but they point out something you didn't quite notice or a life experience of it. And those were the people I think that did really, really well.
Um, do you think that sometimes with a topic like cigars or even drinks, we spoke about the conference and Sean Finter, who just made a beautiful comment earlier on Facebook. Shout out to Sean. Do you think that with topics like these, where people get so passionate about the product, everything that comes with it, the whole lifestyle, the culture, that we just get too nerdy and it sucks the fun out of it?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, that's a personal decision for everybody. I mean, some people that's what they're into. They're into the minutia of it. They're into that aspect of it, and if that's their outlet, that's okay. I mean, everybody's different. I mean, I think sometimes we can over evaluate a cigar. I think sometimes when you look at some of the bloggers and stuff like that, I mean, the first third had these flavors, the second third had these, the third has these, the fourth third, which is my favorite, had these, and some of these ones that I remember reading a review one time, and it was of one of my cigars, and I remember I'm like, all these flavors they had, boysenberries from the south side of the hill, and all these things, and they get all the way to the end, and they said, although it wasn't a very complex cigar, it was really good, blah blah blah. I'm like, how can it not be complex if you just got out your thesaurus and named off 15 flavors that you got throughout the thing? So sometimes I think we over evaluate a cigar. I try to. I had a really good experience when Abe at Smoke Inn approached me a couple of years ago to do what was a club where basically it was called the Connoisseurs Club. And what we did is we got 5 unbanded cigars and we mailed them out to the group, and they didn't know what they were. And they smoked them, and they just got, because there's this pretense. And Sam Lucia gave me some really good advice years ago when I had first started. When I went into a shop, we said, take off the band. Even though if it's a cigar you already got, take off the band and sit down with the retailer and let them smoke it, because they're not prejudging the cigar on the band. They're not prejudging the colors, what the box looks like, things like that. So that club really had, and there were moments for me, by the way. So the rule for me is Abe would send me 2 packs and I would smoke through all 5, and I didn't know what they were. I wanted to have that experience. And there were some brands that I got to tell you, I honestly, as a cigar consumer, would walk by that brand every day of the week and never pick up one of those cigars. And there were some of those I'd smoke. I'm like, this is really good. And I'd text Abe or Alex and go, what is this? And they would tell me it's XYZ. And I'm like, you just broke my heart, because I thought this was a brand that I'd literally written off. So it was a really, really good experience. So sometimes I'm thinking, just smoke a cigar without worrying about flavors and things like that. Sometimes I see some, oh, I had to touch it up because it was, 2 millimeters off, and I had to. You didn't have to touch it up. It probably would have self-correct just fine. I mean, so sometimes I think it takes the fun out of it a little bit because we over evaluate. But that's some of the positions that some people are in. It's their job to evaluate. The really good ones will smoke several of them, and they won't. For me personally, I will usually give every cigar at least 2 shots, if not 3. because I don't know if it was my palate that day. I don't know if it was just maybe the cigar was off a little bit. Maybe I was off. So if someone turns me on to a cigar and say, "Hey, you got to try this," I'll usually give it 2 or 3 smokes before I may write it off for me personally. So I try to just randomly just enjoy the experience and see what it is. And actually, the best thing I got was Eladio when he was with Davidoff. I was working on a cigar, and I brought it to Eladio to smoke. And usually, a lot of people will smoke it and go, "Well, I think it needs this or that," and stuff like that. Eladio asked me right out of the gate when he started smoking, he says, "What are you going for? What are you trying to achieve with the cigar?" It was an open-ended question because then he could evaluate on the merits of what I was intending to do. And I think that's just sometimes what we need to do as cigar smokers is just smoke the cigar. Don't worry about all the flavors. Don't your first pass at it, just smoke it, and see it. See what did it taste good? Did you like it? What did you like about it? Not like about it? Don't worry about the inertia of, what flavors and did it change? For me personally, I don't like a lot of changes in a cigar. I'm not looking for a Willy Wonka, everlasting gobstopper of, Thanksgiving meal throughout my cigar. I just want a cigar that I know to, which is why we tend to, 15 years ago, cigar smokers had one size, one cigar, one brand. That's all they smoked. Now we're more like wine drinkers. We're like, okay, what did I have to eat? What time of day is it? Is it hot out? Is it cold out? Am I on the golf course where I'm not going to give the cigar my full attention? Or am I sitting on my deck just trying to write notes for the week or something like that? So, we all have different experiences in there, but sometimes it's just enjoy the cigar. You don't have to overanalyze all of them. Just enjoy them for what they are.
I think one point that we can all agree on, though, is that the cigar industry could definitely do with more educational resources, more thorough information, deep dives, and information that you can rely on. We sometimes discuss, and it goes back to the blending seminar, the fumos, the different tobaccos. Recently, we were discussing more frequently on the show that I believe the industry has not fallen into the trap. That would be wrong to say, but the industry has become very accustomed to the first information you put out about every single cigar is wrapper, binder, filler, and probably where it's made. And when you think about it, for 99% of the consumers, those information are irrelevant because it will give them very little information about what they're actually perceiving. How is a Yalapa Viso contributing to the blend unless somebody has had the experiences that you have collected, Fred, spending time at the factory, smoking pure grade tobaccos, and building a database of this is what X tobacco will present to me and how it could possibly contribute to the overall blending experience, which is a whole different animal then again, besides just fumo. How do you think about that? And do you think it's a consequence of shortening of attention span, as we said before, because it's something you can easily brag about, and if you want to show off in the lounge, oh, I know this is this rapper.
Yeah, there's definitely that, and there's definitely misinformation. There's some, there's people that know just enough to be dangerous. The misinformation of look, and some of it is just your natural evolution. The cigars, if you've been smoking cigars for over 10 years, say the cigars you started smoking are probably different than the cigars you smoke now. Your palate changes, changes as you get older. Your palate changes as to what you find to be good. We've all done the same thing with wine. You start out with a sweeter wine, and then before you know it, you're years later on a Bordeaux or whatever it is. I think that there's misinformation out there that I think steers people. The idea that, oh, if the cigar is darker, it must be strong. Maduros must be strong. That's not the case. So you see stuff in lounges like that go all over the place. The constant fake Cuban one, the constant, is it plume? No, it's mold. I don't care what, it's mold. It's mold. That's the answer, by the way. I mean, I've seen legitimate plume like 3 times my entire life. It's mold. Is it an okay amount of mold where you can brush it off and smoke it? Yeah. But is it mold? Yeah, it's mold. So there's a lot of misinformation, but I think there's been a lot of education. But then I also wonder, how much are you really going to educate? I mean, so if you take, like, I'm not a huge beer person. But I imagine that if you're a geek in the craft brew situation, I know people like Randy and things like that are way into that. I don't need to know all that. I just drink the beer and go, I like the beer or I don't like the beer. I don't need to know all the details of it. It's just, it was a good beer to me. So sometimes I don't know that we need all that. I think we just need to do it if it's a barrier to you discovering what might be your next best cigar, like a Maduro, or some people saying, well, I don't smoke Dominicans because they're all mild. They're not all mild. And look, each island, each region has its own characteristics that are great for the right time for you to have it. Nicaragua has more natural spice to their tobaccos. Dominican has floral notes to their tobaccos that just does not exist in Nicaragua. So it's just a question of what fits your palate at that moment. So go back and try. And that was one thing that was really cool about the Connoisseur Club, is it got a lot of people on a lot of cigars in a lot of regions that they weren't paying attention to. And the other thing I would say pay attention to that I think before some of the inertia is start looking at the different brands you like and start looking at the factories. I've been saying this for years because there are certain factories that keep putting out, because I can smoke a cigar and I'm probably 60-70% I can tell you the factory it came out of, because they all have this signature. They all have how they age tobacco or the tobaccos they're playing with. And every once in a while you get something outside of there. But you may find yourself not going, it's not Corojo you like. It may be, I like all the cigars coming out of this factory because I like the way they're doing it. And so I think that's a better road for people to go down to as they're discovering their new cigars. But yeah, I'm stopping the misinformation, I think, would be a big deal. But we're always going to have that.
From a brand and manufacturer perspective, there's probably no right or wrong as to how you approach the transparency aspect, because somebody might be more secretive, but it's integral with the overall concept of how you want the brand to be portrayed and perceived. Whereas for somebody else, it's probably everything is available in terms of information and the geeky stuff, and you can probably research the amount of rain that fell in that particular year when that tobacco was primed.
Well, let me ask you a question then. Do you like or dislike a cigar based on the amount of information they disclosed about the blend?
No.
I mean, it may be you get more background about it, but I don't have a problem when someone doesn't disclose the blend. I'm either going to like the cigar or not like the cigar. Whether I have a laundry list of what factory, what farm, and all the other stuff, that may be cool if I want to go down the rabbit's hole and geek out over it. But knowing that doesn't make me like the cigar any better or worse.
That's an excellent point. Yeah, very true. Brett, you were a cigar geek to begin with. You stepped into the industry. You've played around with this whole ecosystem for decades now. What do you think you have still in you that you would like to give to the cigar industry in terms of where do you think you could make a significant impact or a change, something you could offer to the cigar world that you haven't probably brought to the table?
Wow,
yet?
that's a great question. If somebody has an answer, please email me at I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I mean, look, the Final Puff episodes were big for me because I wanted people to see them as real people. I wanted them to share stories. And the one I was most nervous about, because I knew that I had access. I knew them. I'd had dinners with them and stuff. So I knew that if I called them up and I remember because the first person I talked to was Ernesto Carrillo, and I said, hey, I'm thinking of doing this. He's like, I love it. And the idea was I was just going to sit down and I was going to have some questions, but it was going to go wherever it was going to go. But I wanted people to see them as real people and, what hurdles did they go through? What do they like, not like, things like that. And the one I was most nervous about was Carlito Fuente, which my intent was not to do Carlito in the first season. My intent was to, have them out there and then approach Carlito, because Carlito knew me and I knew him, but I mean, Carlito knows everybody. And so when the way it came down, all of a sudden Carlito said, I had the spot and I already had the crew hired. And so I was so nervous because Carlito wanted to do it in Banal. He wanted to do it at the Hemingway House. And it was literally going to be me sitting 5 feet, not even 5 feet, 4 feet away from Carlito smoking cigars. And I was so nervous. It was the only one I was nervous about because I didn't have that relationship with him. And that hour was just him saying all sorts of things. And it was nice because the one thing I gave all of them, well, two things I gave all of them. One, they all got to pick the location. And two, they all got to had the rights to pull, and if they want, if when we went through the interview and we, put it together and show them the rough cut, if they wanted to cut anything, they absolutely had the power to cut whatever they wanted. Nobody cut anything. And I remember the moment in the interview with Carlito where I'm like, I finally got to relax, and I look kind of relaxed, but I'm not relaxed. Carlito was talking about the factory, and if you've ever had the chance to see his factory in Dominican Republic, or get the chance, definitely do. I don't know any factory that has a build out the way it does and the aesthetics of it. And there's probably crown molding in the janitor's closet. I mean, it's amazing. And he's talking about the passion, and he's a very hard on the sleeve person. He's talking about family and heritage, and how all the things he did in the factory where, they destroyed the rolling tables, but he kept pieces of them to put on the new rolling tables because he didn't want to lose that mojo or whatever. And I remember asking Carlito, I said, well, let me ask you this. I said, you don't give a lot of tours. I said, so did you build the factory for everybody else, or did you build it for yourself? And he's like, man, I guess I built it for myself. Thanks. I mean, so there's these moments in all of them where I got people to see behind the curtain a little bit, and they were all great because they ran with it. But it was a lot of fun. So from a contribution standpoint, I wanted to create something that didn't have sponsors, didn't have an agenda, didn't have what's their latest, greatest cigar. I wanted to give the cigar industry something where it's like, hey, you want to know? I didn't realize at the time, by the way, Lito and Tony had never done an interview together. Manola and Raquel had never done an interview together. I didn't even know that when we did it. But I wanted, if you were sitting there smoking a cigar from Lito and go, oh, hey, have you seen that interview with Lito where he's talking about legacy? And at one point, Lito's talking about, realizing he's not going to be around forever. And he has this very heartfelt comment. And Tony's like, I didn't know that you felt that way. I mean, so there's these moments where you get to see them as real people. I wanted people as close as I could to have the experience if they were having an hour sitting in a lounge or having an hour sitting at dinner with those people. So that was a big contribution to me. And I'd like to do some more of those. They were fun. They were revealing. So I'd like to do something like that. I don't know if it's more of those or something where I can give back as far as that's concerned, but I was very proud of it. There could have been somebody way better interviewing than me, that's much more polished, but I knew they'd be comfortable and I knew they'd share their stories, and they did. So that's a win.
Excellent point. Do you have concrete plans as to where you want to go next career-wise?
So yeah, I have a couple things. I haven't decided which one to do yet. When I sold Nomad, I went almost 2 years, and I was still on these shows, and I kind of felt like the guy, like, why am I on these shows? Because I don't own a brand anymore, So I was filming Final Puff when Dion called me, and I know Dion a long time, and Dion asked me to come on board. And so we finished that out of January. I'm still actually helping them. I was supposed to exit, but we're trying to work on this other guy doing some stuff. So I'm still involved with Illusione. But during that period before Dion had called, I had a lot of great, people call me and say, hey, why don't you come work with us, do this? And I'm just kind of at the age where, one, it had to be fun. It had to be what I wanted to do. It really wasn't about the money. And there were only so many companies that I really liked the people, the company, and the cigars. There are a lot of people I love their cigars, but I'm like, there's no way in hell I'd work with those people. And there's people that I love the people, but I'm like, man, I just can't see myself, getting behind those cigars as much. So
the value proposition was always helping them with communication and marketing, mostly in the sphere.
Yeah. So I mean, there were a couple that were really kind of cool brand owner, brand ambassador things, but I just didn't really see that as a role for me. I do like, how can I get your story to the consumers more? How can I do podcasts? How can I do social media? How can I do events or whatever that bring the attention of your brand? Kind of like, what is that through line between the factory and the consumer? What is that story you want to tell? Why should they smoke your cigar? Why should they be part of your tribe? I really like that. I really enjoy that. And so the marketing part's really cool to kind of have a little bit of the know-how of it. But really, I'm just a cigar geek that loves, sharing information with people.
If there were one quick fix and one, not necessarily universal rule, but one advice that you could give to all the brand owners in the industry as to how to be better at their marketing, what could it be?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. You always have really good questions. You know that? Um, it's hard to come up with a universal one, but I think it's a matter of finding whatever method it is. It may not be social media, it may be videos, it may be behind the scenes stuff, but find find a straighter line of communication to the consumer. Not to bypass the stores on sales. I think stores are an integral part of our industry. They're the core of our industry. But find a way to communicate your story because it's disjointed if you're expecting it to tell your story on the shelf. It's disjointed if you're expecting the shop owner or the guy behind the counter to tell your story. Find a way to share your story directly with consumers somehow. And then I think you'll find more of your tribe and they'll understand who you are and why they should smoke your cigars.
Excellent. Um, One final point that I would like to discuss with you, Fred, before we wrap things up, and I have to say I'm eternally grateful for the time that you've presented us with, and I'm so much enjoying today's show, really, and I think a lot of people do, based on their comments and the feedback that I'm reading
Oh, thank you. Thank you. No,
whilst
this has been
posting
great.
and
This
getting
is
with
great.
you.
I've loved watching the show. I think I texted you right after watching Going with Lauren or Laurel from AJ Fernandez, and I'm like,
Yeah,
man, he asks really good questions. It's a great show, and it's tough to find your voice in the sphere. Like everybody tells me to do a podcast. I'm like, dude, everybody out there already does it great. I don't need to be another guy. I mean, if I do something, it's got to be bringing something new. And so yeah, no, I mean, kudos to you and what you're doing.
thank you. That's greatly appreciated. I have to say, I always try to stay very true to one aspect that I think is important, and you have mentioned that yourself, and that is when hosting an interview, it's only about the guest. It's about you, and it's about our audience, and humbly trying to bring some sort of value, a little piece, a little nugget of information or value, entertainment, education to their day. And I think a lot of people try to, look like the smart guy or make it too much about themselves. And I'm just I'm nothing, I'm a humble facilitator.
Well, no,
And
no, but I think that's a great point because it's Johnny Carson versus Conan O'Brien. Johnny Carson was just as funny as Conan O'Brien, but Johnny Carson always made it about the guests. What questions can I ask? How can I showcase this? Because you know what? They see you every week on here. They want to see the guests. And that role is tremendously hard to do because you look at Conan O'Brien and he'll have the same guests on there, but he's interrupting them. He's got his little shtick on there and stuff like that. And don't get me wrong, Conan's funny, but it's like I'm here to hear what this other guy has to say. And so that skill that you're talking about, like in Final Puff, there's no point in Final Puff do I talk about my cigar smoking, my having a brand, how long I smoke. It was all about them. And I think when people can do that, they bring value to the audience, which is exactly what you're doing. And it's hard to do because you want to throw your opinion on everything. I get to say my opinions all day long on here because I'm the guest, but as the host, it's like every time you do, you have to be very cautious how often you throw it in, and you do it in the form of a question, which is a great way to do it.
the last point I wanted to ask you is I had a very interesting conversation with Gary Pash and George Brightman a couple of weeks ago when I was in and around DC touring with George, and we spent a great afternoon and evening with Gary sitting in his office. We spoke about one thing that keeps not bothering me, but it's lurking in the back of my head, and I think about it a lot now, and that is when we look at the industry at all various different stakeholder levels, manufacturers, retailers, but also end consumers, of course, and everything in between. There's various generations in place currently. There's the real old schoolers who are already retired and we're on the cusp of losing them. There's people like the Pete Johnsons who have, after Lido Gomez, they're firmly entrenched and they're heavily inspired and influenced by the old schoolers, but they've put their creative spin on it and interpreted it slightly differently, and were the new generation that helped the boom sort of manifest into something new that was sustainable throughout the early 2000s and the 10s. And now there's a young generation, and that's true for retailers and consumers, manufacturers, and it feels like not all of them are as firmly rooted in the tradition, and a lot of what's coming out seems to be challenging or trying to be different for the sake of being different. I'm wondering, and I'm very curious to hear your thoughts on this. How do you think we as an industry can do a better job at bridging all these various different generations and trying to create something or foster a communication and the conversation amongst all of them to build something that is not only interesting, inspiring, but that's also sustainable for the future?
It's a great question, and this came up in a discussion I had a couple weeks ago about some of the newer people and what they were doing, and someone asked my feedback on this particular party on there. And look, I think you can be a disruptor. I think you can do things different. I don't think you should ever be disrespectful of the people that made the industry what it is today. And that's my line in the sand. I think there are some people that are doing some very interesting things. And as long as you recognize and appreciate the heritage that brought this industry to what it is, and you put your own spin on it, then I am all for it, and push the boundaries. I think if you find a tobacco that no one wants to play with and you play with it, that's what you should be doing. I think that's true to, whether you're talking about blends, packaging to some extent. I think there's all sorts of great, seminars, things like that. But I don't think you ever have to be disrespectful of who brought it to the table. I don't think you have to I don't think you have to look at an industry that is hundreds of years old and say, you're the cutting edge, you're the one that's finally, knows how to blend, you're the one that finally knows how to do this and stuff like that, because it's just not true. It may get you a tribe that's following a disruptor, but they're just following a disruptor for the sake of just being an anarchist. They're not following you because you're necessarily there heritage wise. When I first went down there for the first year, when I went over to Nicaragua, because I had a good in DR, that was, it was Avo. So, I mean, I'm getting introduced to everybody. When I went to Nicaragua, I didn't have that. And it was literally check the ego at the door. They're always going to know more than you. They're always, appreciate the heritage. So the first year that I was there, and I would be down there for 3 or 4 months, the first year, or almost 2 years, I was just another guy down there that had money to have a cigar made. They didn't treat me bad. They didn't, but I mean, I wasn't necessarily privy to a lot of conversations. After about a year and a half of paying my dues and having no problem with ruining a pair of shoes in the field or whatever it may be, and they saw that I appreciated their heritage and appreciated what brought them, what they were protecting. If you go down there, I mean, before I went down there, both DR and Nicaragua, you hear stories of passion and family and all these things. As a marketing guy, I'm just kind of like, oh yeah, that's a good marketing spend. That's cool. And then you get down there and see that they really do feel that. So a year and a half into it, I swear it's like I was staying at Los Arcos, and I went over to AJ's, and I swear it's like they all called each other and said, okay, this guy's all right. He's going to represent us well. Because it's like all of a sudden, when I was talking to somebody, they're like, hey, you know what? You need to go look at this. Or, hey, you know what? I know you like this tobacco, but go talk to this guy that has this tobacco or something like that. And it's just like, once they see that you're going to represent their industry in a respectful way, they weren't afraid of competition. They weren't afraid of somebody. It's all ships rise. It's why I love Pro Cigar as an event. And if you only go to, and nothing against Pro Cigar, that's a great event also. If you only go to one event, to see Pro Cigar and see 12 members that are competing with each other 355 days out of the year or 345 days out of the year come together, and they're fierce competitors, but they can put all of it aside for the betterment of the country, for the betterment of the industry. When they see somebody that approaches it from that way, that's very respectful, they're very, very open. They're very sharing of the information, stuff that I thought would have been, there's no way in hell they would tell me. There's just trade secrets, like I think you said earlier, and but they want you to succeed. Now, they're not all like that. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I don't have rose-colored glasses that I'm like everybody loves you type thing, but the true ones that believe it, look, there's scarcity mentality and there's abundance mentality, and these are people with abundance mentality. They built their business, and a lot of these people will talk about, particularly the old guard, they'll talk about someone else in the industry that helped them get to where they are. Lito talks a lot about, Carlito and helping him and things like that. And everybody will talk about someone else, if not multiple people in the industry that helped them along the way, because they were doing it for the right reasons. So the people that are starting up now, I would say, do not be disrespectful of that heritage. Appreciate that heritage that brought you there. Carry it through. Put your own spin on it. Put your own makeup. Make it yours. But don't ever lose what it is on this industry. Cigars, it's not like 100 years ago when they just rolled up tobacco. No, actually, I'm sorry. It's exactly like 100 years ago where they just rolled up tobacco. So it's the same industry over and over again. So I would say to that group, which is a hot button for me. And if we're talking one-on-one, we can go way off the rails on that because I have very distinct opinions on some of them. But yeah, don't appreciate the heritage that brought us here. It's the lounges that are today are the same thing that made lounges great years ago. The cigars that are today are the same thing that made cigars great years ago. And the people above all are those same people that can help with that. So that's how I'd answer that.
Beautiful. And I think sometimes we need to ask more questions and listen more. There's this old saying that God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth, use them proportionally.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
Sometimes we need to be more curious, even, I feel, and especially the younger generation, at least in my perception, does not approach the old generation often enough, and in a very humble way asks for mentorship or guidance on certain things.
And how does it hurt you acknowledging the heritage that brought you there? I mean, it's like when if you're out there and you have your own brand and the people are like, oh, don't smoke that, that's horrible and stuff like that. How does that help you? When I have my own brand, I still today, I'm like, hey, if you haven't tried so-and-so cigar that they just came out with, you've got to try that. That's a really good cigar. That elevates me because I'm so confident in my brand. I'm showing you someone else's brand to try. People that are truly lovers of the leaf or whatever term you want to put, appreciate a good cigar regardless of who it comes from. I like that. Brian said fermentership. That's good.
What a beautiful, beautiful session it has been. Fred, thank you so much. I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation, and we'll have to do a follow-up very soon. Ideally one in person when we sit next to each other and we can share a cigar.
Absolutely. I look forward to it.
But many, many thanks for everything that you shared with us. Continued success and joy with everything that you're doing. And it's been a privilege to have you on the
Thank you. It was my privilege. Thank you. Thank you for having me on the show.
So thank you to everybody who joined us tonight. Thank you so much for another great session, an inspiring one, I have to say. Please stay tuned. Join us again next week, same time, same station. And until then, light them up and all the very best. Cheers. Good night.
Everybody.
Great show.
Great show, Fred.
Thanks.